This is Lama Tantrapa. Thank you for joining us for the third webinar of this series dedicated to the spiritual dimensions of martial arts. Lama Rangbar, our guest tonight, will be sharing with you the principles of the spiritual development using some of the martial arts and energy arts in his Tibetan tradition, and also sharing some of his experiences. Welcome to our webinar, Lama Rangbar. It's always great to have you here.
Yes, namaste. Thank you very much for the welcome.
Well, as previously, you started your presentation with a brief chant. Would you care to do the same today?
Yes, very much, because especially I have to draw the material not from my, intellectual obscured mind, especially today, but from hopefully a wisdom source. I don't have any wisdom myself, so I have to phone someone who does. So I have to, so this is the ancient telephone system to the wisdom channel. I have to link up to the satellite first, so I'll do a prayer.
That's what we have the internet for.
Well, the internet's only as good as what you put on it, so I'm going to try to pull from somewhere. We're kind of a simple machinery in a way, just like any radio. Depends what TV, what channel you turn yourself onto. Similarly, there's vibratory frequencies and everything, and we're like a tuning fork. We have to decide what program we're going to tune towards. And that's very important. I mean, whenever you have a computer or anything, the first thing is, what program are you running? And if you were, I give an analogy, maybe a flea on a dog's back, and you think, I'm so happy, I'm going north, you think you're going north, you're walking from the nose of the dog to the tail, and you say, I'm going north. I'm a happy flea, and I'm going north. I know I have to get north. I'm very proud of myself. I'm headed north. I know it. Even my compass. And actually, the dog is much bigger than you, and he's headed south. And you're happy, headed north. For every step you take as a flea headed north, the dog takes one step headed south. And the dog's step is thousands of your steps. In other words, baby, you're going south. In other words, you're running on a program that you don't really recognize. So the flea is, from the point of view, he's happily going north, he thinks, but by and large, he's headed south, and he's headed south quickly. Similarly, in our mindset, we think we're free. We think we're not manipulated. We think we're so smart, and we're so sure of where we're going. And you look at it at the end of the day, and you've been running someone else's program. There's a subscript, which is more than annoying, even if you don't even know it's annoying. It's called insidious. And so all the talk of being a martial artist and all these things, like I said, is if you're running someone else's program and you don't know who you are and where you're going, you've got a major problem. So it's very important to, go into some process of introspection and going to people who have gone through the process, checking them out, seeing where they came out, and then trying to adapt some program for yourself that's going to clarify actually what program you're running by. So this is the first thing I'd want to mention.
Right. And also it's interesting that everything is relative. The dog may be thinking that he's going south, but the dog may also be moving somewhere else other than where he thinks he's going. just because, you know, maybe he's on the back of a huge elephant or
Planet
one
Earth.
of those
Planet Earth.
tortoises that Chinese believe that supported the Earth or whatever. And even if we're looking at Earth, well, it's tumbling around the sun. So we're looking at how everything is really relative. And when we accept that relativity and we fully acknowledge that nothing is as it appears, then how do we deal with that ambiguity intelligently?
Well, I think it's very good you brought up. You went straight for a point I'm going to be getting at, because when we talk about relative, or when we talk about relative world and notions of absolute, well, if there's a relative truth, and absolute truth comes into it, and then again we quickly have to get back to the relative again, because we're in the relative world. So these two things we're going to be straddling today in the conversation, I hope so. And things are relative that way. There's a you know, as a human being, we want to get to the bottom of it. We should, if we're a good scholar or if we're a seeker, if we're truly seeking truth and not just trying to imitate what others have done or take for granted what people tell us. Buddha never said to do that. He said, take my words and check it out. So if we're a good scientist and we want to do our job, our homework, it's not that we're arrogant and we don't want to listen to what some saints have said. But there's a joke about it. One guy, he said, so, you know, great wise one, what supports this earth? And he said, well, it's on a turtle's back. And he said, oh, well, if it's on a turtle, well, what's underneath that turtle? And he said, son, another turtle is under that turtle. And he said, well, what about that turtle? And he said, oh, no, you don't. It's turtles all the way down.
Yes, that's a well-known story. Turtles All the Way Down, I think, is also the name of the book that I read a few years ago.
But anyway, you know, it's a quick answer to shut someone up, but we don't go for that. You know, we need to check what's underneath the other turtle. Okay, so we come to this notion that we accept there's some chance our GPS system has been compromised. Okay, we're in this earthly form, and we're, you know, most of us are happy about it sometimes, unhappy about it other times. If you talk to certain types of people in terrible country situation, at war, starving, they're unhappy most of the time, suffering very badly. Some people are happy, it seems, but if you really ask them, come on, don't play games with me, are you happy? They'll say, no, I'm not really happy. In fact, everything I do is a distraction to the fact that I'm not happy. I mean, a lot of people are like that if you really get down to it. So we have to check what's gone on. If every being is pursuing happiness in some way or another, we have to ask, how good a job are we doing at it? Now, one of the things that comes up right away is that we tend to want to pursue something, you know, a pursuit of happiness. I mean, our Constitution says, you know, right there, the right to pursue happiness. So it's a big deal for us. We want to pursue that. And so we think there's something I'm going to get if I chase it fast enough, if I work hard enough. This thing that I perceive will be the source of my happiness will eventually be in my hand, and this will be equal to happiness. The problem is that is a dualistic relative truth, and it swims around a lot. And even once we get those things, once we get the Cadillac, there's the monthly payments. So we are kind of not sure always about the true enjoyment of that. And the Cadillac eventually could get repossessed. It could just come. It could be the source of our death, even. You know.
Or it could just come out of style. You know, the pink Cadillac with green stars may no longer be as stylish tomorrow as it was, I don't know when, back in the 70s. So we may actually find that we don't want the Cadillac. Now we want the Karma car, because that's the environmentally friendly one. Never mind, it costs you twice or three times as much.
Right. So So there's something inherent. Now, we also like a game. We like a game. We like the chase. I mean, people play games all the time, video games. There's no money going to come out of your cell phone when you're playing Fruit Ninja or whatever. That, you know, you're not going to. It's not that there's any reward other than the fact that you're a little bit better at it today than you were yesterday. So we like a game. But the bottom line is that in the pursuit, there is something inherent in that pursuit that it may not be obtainable the way we think. But the nature of mind is not something that exactly, it's some balance. You talked about relative. There's some balance of the relative and absolute, because if you look at it closely, for example, if Buddhahood or full enlightenment was something that you have to obtain somewhere, like a fruit drink or a fruit cocktail, like this. This is called heavenly fruit. This is a fruit I never saw before. It's here in Florida, by the way, this time. The broadcast is from Florida. So there's this something of heavenly fruit. It's got a lot of. I never saw it before. It's heavenly fruit, and I picked it, and it should be that.
It looks heavenly. It may not taste heavenly, though, huh?
It has no taste related with heaven, no taste whatsoever. It's just very good for you.
So when we look at Buddhahood and experience of enlightenment, many Buddhists would probably argue with me about it. And many Tibetan Lamas are trained in how to maintain certain debate or argument, especially on philosophical topics. But my thesis in this particular case would be that enlightenment is a process rather than a destination. So attaining full enlightenment is another trap. It's a spiritual setup. It's a spiritual entrapment that many people fall into because they think that there is a destination to achieve. And so they're striving. And the process of enlightenment, on the other hand, doesn't require striving. As a matter of fact, the more you are striving, the less enlightened you are.
You can never really be totally integrated with that because it's dualistically separate. So the good news is that the ground, the unadulterated wisdom ground, primordial ground, is not something you have to obtain. It's something that has to be, it's a negative problem. You have to get rid of the behaviors and distractions and tendencies that pull you away from that. And so we talk a lot about identifying what's in the way, more than we talk about how to get those qualities. And the process of recognition, unfortunately, it's different for different people. Some people have Garuda-like awareness. That means as soon as they hear about the teachings or they're introduced into them, their mind immediately says, "Oh, I knew it. You know, I got it. I knew it. Thank you." And then some people just, no matter how much you tell them, it's going to be a process of, you know, settling down the mind, going through a lot of processes of purification before they could really relate to what you're saying or exemplifying, for example. So the process is a path aspect. And even the Garuda-like people, the people who could be very quickly illuminated by what we call pointing out instructions, where the nature of the mind is pointed out, either by a slap in the face with a sandal or some kind of subtle indication of some kind, or a shock, or some gradual path. You know, the processes to the purification, or even those who may wake up, still have to stay awake. I mean, I've woken up sleeping people before, and sometimes they fall back asleep again. My son, I might have to wake him up 3 times before he wakes up. So waking up once is no guarantee that you're going to stay awake.
And this is also applicable to the spiritual awakening. Even in one of my books, I wrote that after the most profound awakenings, we all have tendency to fall asleep again. And it's no guarantee that we won't fall asleep after the next awakening. So in other words, it's a process of becoming enlightened, becoming awake, awakening staying awake for longer, perhaps awakening more frequently. It doesn't take that long to awaken, but there is a certain process of increasing your level of awakenedness rather than just awakening once and for all and boom, now you are fully awake. Now what?
Exactly. So the Dzogchen, the Great Perfection teachings, go right for the jugular of the situation for what we would call a high practitioner, or let's say a person of high capacity, high potential. But they still take the time to say to you, listen, now that you've recognized this, you still need to keep your mind, or you still need to keep your disciplines in a certain way in order to make this indelible, or in order to make this non-returnable. You know, you bought the thing, now to keep it, okay? To pay off the loan or whatever it is, you know, you got to keep it. So the talk I wanted to enter today a little bit at first, I think it was for last week and we didn't get to it, was the purification path. And we talked about movements of martial arts and how they can become a medicine, sometimes a physical medicine, sometimes a psychological medicine. For example, I mentioned that, okay, the drunken style receives the wine or refuses the wine is one way of communicating to a student without actually telling him go get a girlfriend. You know, it's one way of opening a student up for karma, engagement with karma, and to let them come out of a shell and to solve their karmic problem by engagement in the world in a full way. And of course, there are consequences aside from going bald, which is one of the consequences of taking the junk. I say that seriously. You receive Drunken God movement or the Lidi Kwai Crippled Beggar. You practice it nicely, you'll go bald probably. That's just the nature of it. If you do that, of course, you're going to have some karmic engagements, and then how to shut the valve off. You know, once you've opened the tap, how do you your student is running around having a lot of girlfriends, you might have to shut the tap now at some point, so you refuse the wine. So, but this is a very, I don't want to talk too much about these things because it's really between a spiritual friend and another spiritual friend who have agreed to use a certain process. There's a lot of trust involved there and a lot of hand-holding, and it's not something that is just like, you know, a weekend you go in, you pay for a weekend warrior workshop, and you know you get these things. It's not like that. This is a real relationship with the teacher who's guiding you. It needs some testing, that relationship.
And can a teacher also offer the teaching or the technique that would grow your hair back?
Good luck with that. You know, it's
you could make a lot of money off of that, you know.
Yeah, they could make a lot of money though. So we have some notion of two types of purification, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. One is purification by emptiness, one by fire, and the fire has two categories, which I'm going to go into with you a little bit, if I can, if we have enough time. Okay. But first, let's talk a second about the obscurations that we're trying to cut through. Let's identify, if I want to get down to my nice shiny wood floor, which is so beautiful, it's teak wood and it's covered with all kinds of stuff, I want to know if I should be using a solvent or if I should be using a scraper, or what do I have to do to get at the beautiful wood floor. So our natures are obscured, so what am I going to have to do? I have to identify the obscurations. So I guess Tibetans had a lot of time to hang around and discuss all these things. Maybe they didn't have a job. Maybe they're sitting in a monastery discussing these things, meditating and writing it down for centuries. So the four obscurations is a topic of import. And we say, Legi Dripa, Bhatagi Dripa, Nyomongi Dripa, and Shegi Dripa. So these four obscurations are the karmic obscuration. That's something like, whatever deals you made with the devil, you've got to pay it back, or something like that. It's a karmic, it's a tendency for a certain action. The second one is habit. I always wake up late. Whenever someone says something to me, I always react this way. I like yogurt, I don't like diet yogurt, or whatever it is. The next one is the emotional obscuration. So instead of the 5 wisdoms displaying brilliantly, they are distorted by ignorance and become a distorted image. So instead of desire becoming discriminating wisdom, it becomes neurotic grasping, attachment. And instead of mirror-like wisdom displaying beautifully, it becomes distorted into hatred, where you mistake the image in the mirror and you start to fight with it and say it's bad and get away from me and I'll kill you. But you're not even recognizing it's a mirror image. So the 5 wisdoms distort, and that's called the emotional obscurations, or the obscurations of the 5 wisdoms. And these also relate to 5 organs, 5 elements, etc. So they're very much tied into the martial path. And then finally, intellectual obscuration. Well, we think we're smart, and some people are not so smart, so they're let's say, I don't want to be impolite, but let's say dummies. Some people are stupid, let's say. But then there's those of us who are really smart, really clever, and guess what? That turns out to be just as dumb. In other words, we're so smart that we're so convinced of our intellectual attribution of things that we don't see the primordial nature of things.
You know, or the way I put it is that being a dumbass and being a smart ass still is being an ass.
That's right. So we have to be careful, and no matter who we are, a dog or a llama, you know, we llamas are not. We also can be, you know, just as much or more obscured as the dog is. You know, so these obscurations are insidious, can be anywhere. So we have to kind of be diligent. So these obscurations. So there are different aspects to them. Now, probably in the end, it's all one gig. In other words, you have a prism. It's white light, but if you look at it through a prism, it radiates into the 5 colors, right, or 7 colors, whatever you want to say. The point is that, you know, you break these out: karmic obscuration, habitual obscuration, emotional, intellectual. They're all kind of, I mean, when someone walks into your room, they are what they are. They're a Kodak moment of all their karma, of all their stuff. So if you want to break it down into the 4, that's fine. But whatever it is, they own it. They're in it. And so there's a process, different types of processes. Obviously, the martial arts has one of those aspects. Normally, we move our body, and we start to cleanse the nervous system. Normally, we sweat. We sweat, we move our body, we start to, this is, for example, we move our body, we're engaged in a form. We've been given a form, sometimes they call it katas, or whatever form we're going to do, format. And by adhering to that format, we're too busy to think. We're too busy doing something to really have much of an internal dialogue going on. And so by adhering to a plan and a format, we start to settle the mind inside so that it's only involved with those activities. The body's moving a certain way, the breath will probably follow suit. Sometimes there's a prescribed breathing, sometimes not. But our mind is just engaged in trying to get it right. And
well, anyone who's read any of my books or have been listening to my talk show, The Secrets of Qigong Masters, probably know how I feel about forms. I actually think that they are pretty much unnecessary, if not detrimental. And that's because happiness that we were talking about just a few minutes ago happens as a result of being in the flow of things, being one with the Tao, or being in the flow of energy, qi, or prana, or lung. And in order to feel the flow, we need to pay attention to it. When we are doing katas or whatever forms we do, we're focusing on the external appearance, on the form of our movement, rather than the inner essence of our experience. And so we don't really pay attention to the flow of energy. And therefore, we don't really move with the flow. We move according to a prescribed, premeditated form or of technique. And that actually robs us of the opportunity to be in the flow and to experience that happiness that we're looking for.
Okay, so I'm getting to know you over the telecast, so now I understand, and by the way, this is a pretty common discussion. I think this split, what you're addressing is a kind of split between martial artists as to form. We say pupai and paiwa. That means with form, without form. And some of these spontaneous qigongs, nigong, and these kind of things of where the spontaneous kriyas are allowed to allow the authentic energy to kind of bubble out and purify itself. These are very beautiful traditions, very effective, very fast. I think they are very healthy, good for the body also, good for the mind, and good for the meditation. But I'm not so sure I would wholly throw out the system of form completely, because in my experience, there are some, and I'm not so sure I have the, I'm not going to come here from a point of view of having made a decision or something, and I have some experience, but I don't have all the experience in the world. So I would say that in some cases the forms do serve to develop certain types of capacities which later come in very handy. One of them is the notion of persevering even when things are not exactly what you want them to be. You keep persevering, so they build up certain types of capacities in the muscles and things like that. I tend to agree with you from a certain point of view that the spontaneous flow of primordial wisdom is highly valuable in an energetic sense. But let's not go right there yet. I think we should come back to this, though. I think it's a kind of a nice topic to come back to, and then we can try to see how that relates also to the display of the five wisdoms. Because I'm
talking about almost like a Dzogchen type of Qigong.
Yeah. So it's important I think it's important we get there. But for this audience where we're at right now, what the stage we're at in the conversation, I think I don't want to get there right away because I'll miss some of the stages as a result of having jumped, even though the topic is quantum leap. So I've got to get there eventually.
So we're going to take the quantum leap step by step.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about how big a leap we have to make before we actually make it.
Well, I honestly believe that small steps work better than large leaps, because at each juncture then you can look back, recognize, so how far have I covered with this particular step? How well is it taking me in the direction that I'm trying to go? Am I going with the flow of energy, or am I struggling against the flow? Are there any adjustments that I can make to make the next step even more authentic and more impeccable than before?
Nicely said. So now I want to come back again then to this notion of purification. Now, from a Dzogchen point of view, of course, now we're going to alternate a little bit between absolute and relative, okay? From a Dzogchen point of view, we could become very glib talkers, very easy to talk. And then we have to be careful. So in absolute talk, well, there's no obscurations to be purified. Who are you joking? You see?
Who are you to purify the obscurations that you think there are?
Yeah, and it's even the hallucinations are, basically the obscurations are, the hallucinations are also hallucinations, or there is no obscuration. So there is that absolute way of talking. There's nobody to be purified. There's nothing to be purified. However, tell that to a dog that he's not a dog. It's still a dog. People have, especially humans, maybe a dog less, but human has a certain type of thing. You know, my name is Dick or Jane from this and such family, and you know, I'm a beautician, and I'm a this and a that, and it's a whole bunch of like identification processes. And if you tell them, you know, you are a free, spontaneous, natural mind, and they say, really, does it mean I don't have to pay the rent, or I do have to pay the rent? And it's like a, you know, legitimate question comes in their mind, right? Like, well, so do I hang out, if what you say is true, do I hang out with this relative identity, or do I drop it? It's the first, if you introduce Dzogchen to someone, the question should arise in their mind. If you've done it properly, for example, Kempo is a, Kempo means Ken is to know, so Kempo is someone who's received a degree. It's a scholar, let's say, of some kind. And this Kempo was teaching, it's a great, wonderful Kempo teaching Dzogchen teaching. And I was quite young at the time, and I had this flash while he was teaching, and you know, the whole bottom dropped out for me for a moment, and I kind of said, ooh, ooh, like, you know, raised my hand or whatever. I said, Kempo, if what you're saying is true, what would therefore dictate whether I went south or north, or, you know, what would, if that's true what you're saying about the primordial ground being all pervasive, spontaneous like that, what would be the motivation for going one place or another? And he looked at me and he said, exactly. And it was kind of like, you know, being turned on to acid, you know, what is it, the LSD. You know, I was kind of stuck there in this, it was quite enlivening and, you know, kind of awakening, but then we're still talking again about what happens when you're in that state, or how to maintain that, or how it falls down. So we're talking about purification. So I went again.
And also how well you can function in that state. Because many martial artists ask me, so if you are in this meditative state of harmony and you are feeling one with the whole universe, how well can you perform in martial arts or any other duties to that matter? And I actually have to say that it's easier to perform at the high level, at the peak level of performance, when you are in the flow. Because when you're in the flow, you are not just relying on your own personal power or strength. You rely on the power of the whole universe. If you are in the flow of things, in the flow of the Tao, if you will, or in the flow of energy that anything is made of in the universe, nobody can really fight against you, because that would be fighting against the whole universe, which is very difficult.
Well, there's a story about Trungpa Rinpoche, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. I wasn't there, so I'm parroting the story, but essentially, you know, I might be embellishing it improperly too, but I think he was in a gas station, like pulling up in a gas station, 7-Eleven kind of thing. Maybe they were filling up the tank, maybe they were buying something at a 7-Eleven, and he was in the store. I mean, in his car, maybe waiting for the students to come back. The window was open, and some robber came up to him with a gun. Maybe they weren't in a good part of town. Trungpa Rinpoche was known for his fearlessness. Just didn't fear anything. And someone came up to him and put a gun, you know, pulled a gun on him and said, you know, maybe they threatened him, maybe they said, give me your money or whatever, or said, I'm going to kill you. And his reaction was to pull the guy's hand with the gun and put it right on his forehead and said, go ahead, do it. And the guy didn't do it because, you know, maybe he was just so, well, you know, what's all this talk? You know, you're going to do it, you do it. People who kill, they kill. They don't talk about it. So you do it. Go ahead. Where is it? The guy who was, you know, what can you do after that point, right? So that's the kind of energy you're talking about. Of course, that's really what I call freehand style. In other words, you know, that's a master. He's a Mahasiddha, great accomplished master. Someone who is ready to face all the things very directly. So we go back again. I want to get back to the purification, because we're still at that level of purification. We're going to the absolute a lot, but I want to go back down again, and we should go back and forth like this. No, when we look at a nickel or a quarter, we have to go to the tails and the heads a few times to see, you know, where we're at with this coin. What is a coin, you know? So, like both sides of a coin, relative and absolute. They follow each other around. They adhere to each other very distinctly. So, again, the purification by emptiness in the Tibetan system, we say we could use Mahayoga as an example here. A Mahayoga is that you're visualizing a form of a deity, and we are saying mantra. So the mind is occupied with the visualization, if you will, which is some people might have trouble with that. They might say, well, so I'm imagining something, and yes, my son, yes, my daughter, you're imagining, but then again, it is a pure fabrication of the primordial mind, so don't worry, it will eventually become real, or it's real, you just don't know it yet, whatever. It's a practice. You have to join the practice to understand.
I call it a dream. And essentially, it's a way to dream something up. It's like a daydream.
In a sense, but it's fabric. I'll get to it, but it's fabric. You come to know its fabric. I'm going to get into its fabric a little bit. What is the fabric of this dream? So you're visualizing a deity, and you are reciting a mantra which is related with the. So the mind or Dhammakaya aspect is involved with the visualization. The speech is involved with the mantra recitation, and the body is in, you know, probably a meditation posture of some kind, maybe doing the mudras of that deity, who knows? Maybe making offerings to that deity in mudra to break one's duality mind. You can't do a lot of these things in the tantric text. You can't do them with a dualistic mind. You can, but it's feeling very awkward, and it's like patting your head, or, you know, patting your head and, you know, rubbing your stomach like this. It divides the mind. There's a lot of techniques in Tibetan Buddhism to break your typical pattern so that something can come out. So the process of the visualization is designed basically to destroy or purify or refine the kind of erroneous projections and garbage you've made. It's a way of house cleaning. And it's going to start to bring it to a little, it's going to churn it up. But the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to feel a little uncomfortable because, well, is this deity real or not? You know, am I doing it right? Am I offending the deities? A lot of nonsense comes up. So many neuroses can start to come up, and then later you might say, oh, I really was the deity for a minute, but, you know, he didn't stick around, or, oh, stories, millions of stories. But by and large, it starts to become a part of the process that you realize once in a while you give it up. In other words, you can't be stubborn forever. Even in martial arts, you might be able to defend 1 punch, 2 punch, 3 punch, 20 punches, 30 punches, but there's going to be a punch you have to take. In other words, so you're doing your practice and your ego is fortified and you're trying to do your practice because you're a good Buddhist and you're going to go through this process. You know, maybe you have some kind of goal-oriented thing also, like you said. But eventually, there's going to be a moment where you kind of give up. Same with tango, dancing the tango with a partner. You're trying to be a good tango dancer. You suck. You're terrible. But eventually the music moves you one day and you practice enough and all of a sudden you're moving the tango effortlessly, and that's what you're after. You're out of the way. So in the meditation, it happens.
That's what I call being in the flow.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you stop moving your own feet and you let the music move your feet.
Like that. So we come to a situation where the meditation, you start to see glimpses, oh, this deity is there whether I say he's there or not, or she, because there's female and male deities, no problem. So, oh, it's really there. Oh, it's not exactly me. It's not exactly not me. It's somewhere, some kind of interdependent thing going on there. It has a blessing. It's affecting my winds. It is full of wisdom. It has awareness. It's kind of my awareness, and it's kind of universal awareness at the same time, it starts to peek through. It means that in this job to clean the floor of its grit and its soil, that we're starting to peek through to the wood. We're starting to recognize, oh, and it could happen right away, and it could take a long time. Everybody's different. It's kind of the luck of the draw. We don't know. But by and large, it's a process that starts to shine through. And at some point, a practitioner will graduate to the state where they say, you know, I'm in for this. I like it. I'm ready because I've gotten my reward enough to know, you know, that when I open the refrigerator, there's probably going to be something in there that I can eat, and it's going to taste good. So you get to the
point. You get hooked, in other words.
What's that?
You get hooked on the practice.
You believe that there's a benefit there, and you're ready to deepen that, and you're starting to recognize probably by that time weights and measures. In other words, you start to recognize how dirty your floor is, how much work there is to do, and the extreme advantages of doing that work. Once you hit that place, you're in a pretty good shape because you've come to an area where you recognize that your true spiritual path is not a cheap one. You're going to pay for that, and you're going to pay for it gladly because it's your crap on the floor. It's your crap obscuring your own mirror, and the floor underneath it's very beautiful. So once you come to that point in the process, we start to develop confidence, real confidence. Not confidence that this guy is good because you wear, you know, because you and I have this nice, you know, we have some nice clothes here. So it's not confidence in a person that, oh, he's dressing nicely and everybody else says he's good, so I have some confidence. That's a very, like, you know, kind of weak confidence. No, we're talking now about kind of knowing who you are, where you have to go. It doesn't matter if someone else is rich. If you're penniless, you still have to earn some money. You know where you are, and you're not jealous or anything. You just know what you have to do. So it's a beautiful place to be in. Recognize where you are. It's great. It's wonderful. In fact, most people, if they get to that stage, are already, I don't know if you want to use a quote, you know, or what is it, a phrase, saved, in a sense, you know, they're already at a point where, this is what I've got to do, and that only deepens. That only deepens. Now you could slide back again, and your work can take over, and you know you can again pull out of it, but by and large, you're sold on the fact that you have a spiritual journey to make that requires, you know, whether or not it's that goal-oriented or not, it requires a process that you're going to engage in, that it's well worth it. So you're in good shape.
And also, as you reap the benefits of the practice, that makes you stronger, or perhaps makes you more awake or more integrated and more capable as a human being. And so you can then put that to work. So in other words, the next step will be even more empowered because with the results of the previous step, you feel more energy and more vitality and more spiritual prowess.
Exactly. Yeah, you gain a confidence. You gain confidence. It's called gaining confidence. Now, there's still this relationship, this conceivably annoying, conceivably beneficial, depending, of the spiritual guide, yeah? And it's a relationship of some kind. It might be a kind of Kalyana Mitra level, which means spiritual friend. It might be more of a tantric guru, which is perhaps more severe. But by and large, it's some kind of discussion about a trust developing where someone can mirror what you're at. You talked about it in some of our previous sessions, so I'm not going to go into it too much. But another kind of aspect of the purification by fire, and I was going to start out by saying there's kind of two purification by fire, like we sweat in the movements. We start to, you know, the skin is a big organ. The skin is a huge organ which people don't think of as an organ. It's a big, huge organ. It's a purifactory organ. It gets rid of a huge amount of stuff from the capillaries that are hidden in the salts of the body. When I used to train, I was a normal kind of kid. You know, I didn't think I was that full of dirt or whatever. But when I used to train with my 5 teachers, they always used to say, "Oh, this guy stinks. You know, he smells bad when you know, means he's not purified a lot of his thinking, his thoughts. He's kind of dirty. His mind is dirty, and that means he smells." I think for wild animals, they'll smell humans as very dirty mostly. I mean, I think they were doing better than I was in terms of their process. They were more advanced, and I was starting out, and I smelled. And after some time of, you know, I used to exercise maybe 8 hours a day, you know, solid practice 8 hours a day of martial arts. And after some time, that will really, you know, clean you out quite a bit. And my sweat then was like water. It was no smell. And then they said, "Okay, now you're at this level, and so you're, you know, you've done this now." That took a long time, many months, I think, to really get it down to that level. And then at a certain point, I was told by one of my teachers I had to drink a lot of goat milk because I had to absorb some power. And immediately the goat smell was in my sweat. So whenever I used to walk in the room, all the guys used to go meh, like that because I really smelled like a goat. Anyway, I'm off track. I'm interjecting these little things just to give the audience an unnecessary good time. It's just part of the color of what might happen to you in your martial art training if you're doing it Asian style, so people make fun of you, you know, for your purification practice. What I'm saying is, your defilements, if you want to call it that, or your obscurations are naked or transparent to those teachers above you, and it's funny. And you have to face that the process is transparent. You can't try to hide this from your teachers where you're at. It's futile. And it gets worse. In a tantric relationship, it gets much worse. When you're with a tantric master, then every single thought you have is known to the teacher. Every single thought. And that can be quite terrifying. First of all, you didn't know how much of a mess your mind was. You know, and then someone's pointing it out to you all the time. "So you think like this, huh? Ha 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 ha. You know, you should say I'm sorry." And, you know, you didn't even say anything. They're telling you to apologize, and the truth is you did have that thought, and that was an erroneous and stupid thought. So your stupidity is always being thrust in your face. Very uncomfortable. In fact, sometimes terrifying. I mean, most of us don't go outside naked. We put on some clothes because I'm a little overweight. I don't want to see everyone to see how my body's not a young body with a six-pack abs and all these things, so I put on some clothes, right? But you can't do that with a tantric master. You can't say, you know, I'm smart, I'm happy, I know everything. You know, forget it. It's not happening. So that is why a tantric relationship with the guru is also quite important. Not because it's pleasant, anything but. It is just relentless, and it is it's a process that it is a kind of guaranteed process if you can handle it. If you're lucky enough to have such a situation, and believe me, those situations are not easy to stick with, because you may not have the good fortune to be able to be in such heat of such transparency for so long.
Well, it's interesting that in the West, most people, when they think of Tantra, they somehow associate it with sex.
Huh.
And obviously there are left hand and right hand paths of Tantra, and for the sake of our listeners who may or may not be fully aware of what type of Tantra you're talking about, would you share a little bit of your understanding or your perspective on the whole world of tantric practice or tantric sadhana?
Well, okay, there's the kind of outer way of talking, tantra meaning continuum or thread. That's a certain branch of the Buddhist teachings that is not sutra, for example. Sutra is whatever the Buddha said, it was recorded. Tantra is the next stream of teachings that come from the Buddha, the Vajrayana teachings. And tantric practice became known or popularized as something to do with sex or something. And here's a funny one. I'm glad you brought it up. I like to tell jokes, so this is good. I was quite young, and it was the first time I went to a monastery, and I think I was with a friend. And there was a lama, and there was a translator, and the translator had a very stuffy British accent. It sounded very formal and stuffy. And the lama said something, ro, 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 in Tibetan. And we were young and sitting there listening to, we wanted to hear something groovy. It's Tibetan, and we wanted to hear something great, and, you know, and then the translator said, so, the Rinpoche would like to say that some people think that Tantra is a kind of magic or wild sex, maybe. But he would like to say that it's not that. And the person who was sitting next to me whispered in my ear, okay, let's go. Let's leave. You know, it's not magic or wild sex, so no reason to hang around here.
We're at the wrong meditation center.
We're at the wrong, you know, we should go listen to someone who is going to talk about magic and wild. He was joking with me, the guy next to me, but he said, I think we're in the wrong place. We laughed a lot about that because he was a monk teaching, you know, and we were terribly disappointed. But anyway, the point here is that this did come out that, you know, in the Tantra, everything that happens to you, sleeping, peeing, eating, all these things become an opportunity to practice. And since people procreate and there's the union, then there are ways, and the union comes from a very primordial, you know, a core sense of these desire and the processes of the desire, path of desire. So how to purify that and how to use that intense energy that's connected with that and to bring it as something useful on the path of purification or enlightenment. So it's just one of the things that happens in Tantra. It just happens to be on the menu of paths. So is sleeping. So some people may not be as sexy or desirous, and they fall asleep all the time, and they're always sleeping and dull and stuff. So they might have to go into the path of the dream yoga, maybe.
Well, I think anybody would benefit from the path of dream yoga. You don't have to be drowsy all the time to learn how to be awake.
I'm just saying that different personalities, there's a kind of medicine, conversely, it could be said that you know, sexual practices could be good for a person who is tired and lethargic too. It's true. There's not any particular rule, but what I mean is that the Tantra, or identifying the Tantra, is more about the methods, the skillful means, and the wisdom associated with the path. It's not about sex or not about sex, okay? So we're still now talking about yogas, in a sense, in terms of purification. Kriya Yoga, Upa Yoga, different types of these. There's 9 yanas. And in these are the practice of, you know, doing something because of purity, cleanliness, or refinement of purity, some notion of purity. And then there's the type of kriya where you're purifying by spontaneous mudra, like a nigung or something like these kind of things, where you're spontaneous energy. And there's Korde Rushan, a number of practices in the Tibetan system which kind of fall in that category. And then you have Tummo or heat yoga. And this is another kind of purification by fire which we have. It occurs very naturally in many different systems, and they're, depending on how they're constructed or how one goes about them, will yield different results. But by and large, in the Tibetan system, we're talking about a process of distillation, and I mentioned this in the Tsalung the other day, that we have a process where the seed essences are being purified. Now, if you really want to talk about this quantum leap and this understanding of the absolute and how to maintain that, this is very important, because why would I wake up one day and be asleep the next? What's the cause of me falling back into this dull, you know, unquantified, unquantum view? Why am I falling back into such a dummy view? Why is that? And why I'm so certain that when I'm awake that that's the truth, and I'm so unaware of it when I'm dull. How is that? What's the basis for the delusion? Or what's the basis for the support of this vision? So we have to look again closely at how we stack up our practice, how our chakras are doing, our chakras in our body, how we're purifying those, what the foundation of our practice is. That's why people often tend to want to go for this grand opening door, the highest teachings, and they want that. They don't have time for the purification, they say. They want to know that the obscurations are illusory. They want a taste of that. And rightly so. We should know the game board. We should know the playing field. But at the same time, the relative work of the purification, I'm sorry, it's going to happen one way or another. Now, you can do it with Dzogchen all the time, but somehow the support structure in your body, speech and mind, your energetics of your body, to develop this capacities on the relative level are the way in which you stand a chance. I mean, once in a while you might be able to jump over one of these hurdles, and what is it? The athletes, they jump over hurdles. Now, once in a while you might just get it right and develop enough energy to do a 4-foot hurdle. But you got to be able to do it consistently, because there's one right after another. And if you want to win the race, you have to be adept at getting over a 4-foot hurdle each time. You can't just say, I did it once, I'm so great. Now, who cares? You know, so you have to train the basis for this experience to be, more level, more consistent. And then, for this, the practices of Tummo and these things, which are going to start to refine, to purify, refine, maintain a clear basis of a clear surface of water, so that your mind is going to reflect. Your lifestyle has to change. You have to start making better decisions about how you're spending your time, what you're investing your mind into. I mean, everybody knows your spouse. You're going to argue, or you're going to recognize how stupid it is to argue. You could even, there's a famous guy, he was asked, he's a relationship specialist. They said, what do couples argue about mostly? He said, good question, I've researched this very thoroughly. And the answer is this, nothing. He said, what do you mean? He said, actually, if you look at what they're arguing about, it's nothing. There's no particular issue or something like that. They just argue. That's his conclusion. Let's say he's right. At a certain point, you just have to decide, are you going to argue or not? Where are you going to invest? How are you going to make your choices about your interface with this world? I think if you knew you were going to die tomorrow, the things you would do today would be vastly different than if you thought you had the rest of your life to live out. So anyway.
Well, this is very much the teachings of being authentic today that I've been taught and I teach nowadays, assuming that we have a long life to live, that leaves us irresponsible in a way that we don't really live our day to day as impeccably, as authentically as we could, thinking, oh, we have plenty of other days that we can live more authentically than today. And so I think it's a really excellent way to encourage living as true to your essence as possible. Say, well, what if today is the last day on earth that you can live? How are you going to live this day? And then if next day comes and you're still alive, great. Then how are you going to live that day as if it's your last day on earth? So then each day becomes even more and more authentic, even more empowered, and the whole life turns into a chain of impeccable steps.
Right. Which is, I think, another segue. You always, it's lucky you give me a few steps to, steps to go on to. Next week we have what's supposed to be the final one of our broadcast, and I didn't yet get into the pure vision and the aspect of the high frequency, what I call high-frequency behavior. Okay, if you wanted to have a radio station that went to very high frequencies, you'd probably have to have a good battery, a good energy supply. It should have an antenna which has a good foundation in it so the antenna is stable. There's a few basic components of the operating system which should be nicely in place before you talk about the roof, the beautiful roof of your house. You have to have a foundation and walls, etc. We all know this story. And so the next discussion comes about pure vision and what I would call the high frequency behavior. So in other words, if you're going to recognize that, you at least have to know how to make your foundation stable in the material. Stage by stage, things are stacked up from solid to refined. And if you want to talk about refined behavior, I mean, you can train a baboon to wear a nice suit and tie and to use a fork and a knife probably, but there's just going to be certain things that happen at the party when you invite the baboon into the party at the rich person's house. He may even grab the right, the correct, he grabs the small fork on the outside first for the salad or whatever, the way you're supposed to do it. He does it properly, but there's going to be some major communication problems between this baboon and the guests, even though he's looks like it's following the right format for the dinner. There's just going to be something missing there. So we want to avoid being the baboon at the high frequency party.
Unless all the other guests are also baboons.
Okay, well, if we change the table, by and large, and it's an interesting, you brought it up, so I have to respond to it, right? You made the joke, and there's truth to every jest, okay? So I have to respond. I can either laugh and just say, yeah, haha, or I can give the joke some depth, because the joke has depth, because we're in a world of baboons, or we're in a world of refined people. Depends on how, a refined person can talk to a baboon and could be very convincing, Mr. Baboon, you shouldn't behave that way because you see there's some consequences to that, and the baboon could refine. In any case, the notion of next week, what we're going to get into, I think, is important to address a little bit. That I would talk about pure vision, the frequency, high frequency behavior. What is that? What are the syllables? What does it mean? Lungtengi kalpa, the kalpa or the eon we live in, which has to do with syllables and these kind of things. What do the syllables mean on the nervous system? How mantra and syllables and the energy that rides on the nervous system, what does that mean? And we come now to this. I want to come back to a point you made where it will come to me how you said it. But by and large, you're trying to improve yourself every day. You're working on this, I would call it, for lack of better words, cultivation, self-cultivation. And again, I always want to, since I'm giving in this seminar, theoretically, my goal here is to share in the hopes that people will be able to come into contact, to get a little bit of a sense that this is a path of vast methods and wisdom, that there is a way to enter that, and this is kind of a portal. This telecast is a way for people to understand, oh, okay, this is not a fly-by-night thing. This is really thought out. It's been refined over generations. It's not just empty talk. How can I learn more about it? How can I get into the actual exercises? And then I think you're offering some kind of course for them. And I can also be contacted, and God willing, and I always use that with a tongue-in-cheek because Buddhists are never supposed to say those kind of words, but I don't care. I'm irreverent. I can say anything I want. So, in other words, if nature allows, if nature allows, then people will eventually be able to come, and I will teach in a graded way. There are people around me who learn that. And moreover, I want to end on the same note that I want people to know about the Stupa project that we're doing, this Mandala for World Peace, because, again, it is a notion of the refined behavior. Of course, the Stupa is just a building, like any other foundation, it's a solid thing. But the notion that we are, what kind of people we are, we tend in this generation, I think, maybe more than other generations, we blame our parents a lot for the things we don't have. It's kind of an entitlement generation. And what I don't have, well, it's because my parents didn't give it to me, or they were bad to me, and therefore I didn't this and that. And talk about the people who cared about you the most. Even if your parents were abusive alcoholics, somehow they raised you and gave you food. You ungrateful little brat. Okay, they did some damage maybe in such cases, but by and large, in a Buddhist philosophy, you've chosen your parents, okay? It's the kid who chooses the trajectory of that womb. It's that consciousness or whatever that is choosing that birth line for karmic reasons or whatever. In the end, you come out with a human birth. And this is a great kindness, not so easy to repay. It may have happened more than once if you believe in reincarnation, but you owe a great debt to your parents. And we say that as vast as there is space, and we're talking about absolute reality or the relative reality of beings arising, the fact that they appear, that all as vast as space, there are that many beings who fill the space, and all of them you've had so many reincarnations that all of them have, at one point or another, have been your own mother or father. That's the vastness of it. And to repay their kindness, we take on this cultivation not only just to get ourselves out of an uncomfortable muck, but because we have debts to not society like someone you never met before. You have debt to humanity and even insects and all these different creatures who are confused and suffering in cyclic existence. You want to return that quantum absolute understanding to them. You want to bring yourself through this journey as a way of giving back also, to return to nature. We're born for a reason, and we're going to pass away, and we can return back to our essences and become a great offering for beings on the way. So it's better, rather than to be an entitled brat, it's better to work hard and to make use of the gift we have in hand called the human rebirth, which is made precious not by saying, well, thank God I got a human rebirth. It becomes precious when it becomes a chariot or a vehicle for self-realization and for benefiting other beings. That's when it becomes precious. Other than that, the human is not so far from an animal, not much different. Even an animal can find his own food better than we can these days. And they get better food too, luckily. So we come to a stage where I hope that the people, again, my project, not mine, but it's a project of our group to make a public place, a place that is a universally public place that everybody can feel part of, to recognize the safeness or the unharming aspect of the bodhicitta, the compassionate mind, in an architectural structure which resonates love, brotherhood, and sisterhood all over. Please visit the Bodhivastu, BODHIVASTU.org, and also Lama Tamchapa's website. I think keep attuned to the seminars and try to put yourself not only in an intellectual weekend warrior workshop on the telecast, but try to get into something that you can really start to take and call your own. And instead of becoming the bratty, entitled generation who raped the planet, and the last generation that did the last rape of the planet and left nothing for our kids, instead of working out yourself like that, to become the generation that recognized that the direction humanity was going in needed some modification and brought us back to the path of cultivation and benevolence for others. That's my wish, that this telecast be dedicated towards realizing that goal for humanity, and that everybody partakes of that nectar and awakens to that brotherly nature, brotherly, sisterly nature. That's my dedication wish.
Thank you, Lamla. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.
like I said, it wasn't mine. I don't have wisdom, but I made a phone call, so something came up. Between the two of us, there's the wisdom, because it's not you or me, but it is a movement, and in that flow is the wisdom.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to end the broadcast.